Before we get into the show, a quick reminder to check out and subscribe to the Beer Edge podcast with Andy Crouch. Each week, he's doing deep dives into breweries, talking with journalists covering the beer space, and unpacking a lot of what makes the beer industry so interesting. Find the Beer Edge podcast wherever you download shows. Welcome to Drink Beer, Think Beer, the podcast that gets to the bottom of every pint. I'm John Hall, and Brad Clark is just done with a barrel transfer day at Private Press Brewing in California, and he's here to talk about wood, memberships, stouts, barley wines, Munichwines, running, mental health, and blending. But first, an invitation to check out beeredge.com for articles, to sign up for the newsletter, and more. And head over to the This Week in Rauch Beer Facebook page and follow TW Rauch Beer on Twitter and Instagram for all kinds of smoked beer goodness. And we're able to bring you this show every week thanks to these sponsors, including NZ Hops. In a little country far down in the Pacific, you'll find a cooperative of master growers whose legend and cultivars have been crafted for over 150 years with creativity and passion to produce some of the world's finest hops. Years of partnership with a dedicated hop breeding program and farming knowledge handed down through the generations sees the current day master growers proudly providing 18 unique New Zealand hop varieties to the world. Visit nzhops.co.nz or find them on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn at NZ Hops Ltd to learn more. And we're also brought to you by Breeze, the leading supplier of specialty malt to craft brewers. They offer the broadest product line in the industry, including a wide range of roasted malts that add flavor, color, and character to beer. Their experienced operators handcraft every batch of roasted malt to ensure the product you get is consistent. Check out brewingwithbrice.com for beer recipes using roasted malt. And the best brewmasters are obsessed with creating a high-quality, consistent product. That means reducing mass viscosity for better wort separation and increasing brewhouse efficiency. Ultraflow Max from Novo Enzymes help you achieve both. It's time to brew with enzymes. Increase your brewhouse efficiency and achieve faster filtration today with Ultraflow Max. Order a free sample today at brewingwithenzymes.com/beeredge. Last week, I was finishing up some blind review panels for Wine Enthusiast magazine, and it was focusing on barrel-aged beers. And there's a lot to enjoy, but one in particular, on this particular weekday morning, stopped me dead in my tracks. And it was a barley wine blend from Private Press. Private Press is the newest chapter in Brad Clark's brewing career. In 2005, fresh out of Siebel, the brewing school, he co-founded Jackie O's, a pub and brewery in Athens, Ohio. Working as a brewer and rising through the ranks as the company grew from a few hundred barrels a year to more than 10,000 barrels a year. And along the way, his recipes were lauded, they racked up awards, and inspired a new generation of brewers who came up behind him. And then in 2019, he announced that he was leaving, moving west to be closer to his partner, and that he'd be starting a smaller brewing operation known as Private Press. 2 years in now, and he's making about 100 barrels of beer a year, which go to members who signed up early, taking a chance on his stouts and barley wines, and then some others who made it onto a wait list and eventually into one of 700 spots available. No taproom, no distribution, just him with the occasional help, and the barrels and stainless. There are benefits to going small, he says, and a change of scenery and a change in life, namely fitness and mental health clarity, have led to the creation of at least one new style, the Munichwine, which his members will be able to taste next week for the first time, but you'll hear about in a moment. The beers, like the one I had for the magazine, are purposeful, and they're more than just a liquid. They're crafted to tell a story, and they're an expression of a brewer who wants to make big, boozy beers for adults, not just necessarily candy adjuncted ales. And that shows in the taste, and it also shows in a career that has honored the past, but is continually looking forward. He spoke to me from the brewery at the end of a long day, and so we start there, and then we go deep into the wood and process and thought exercises and ingredients. And I can honestly say that this was a genuine pleasure to record. Here's our conversation. We're in this unique position today where we're recording this conversation mere hours before it's going to go out to the world. Usually I do it a couple of days in advance, but since I have you, and it's after normal working hours out here on the East Coast and just about coming up on after working hours out on the West Coast, what'd you do at the brewery today?
I transferred 2 new beers into Bright Tank out of barrel. So 7 oak barrels went into each tank, and that was the majority of my day. It was just kind of like shepherding beer out of oak into stainless. And now I've got 2 tanks full of beer that will probably land in my members' hands in like December. I'm a little bit like ahead of the curve right now, but they're tasting good, and I'm excited to get a leg up a little bit on my on the rest of the year. So,
can you say what the beer is?
One of them is Beyond Forever, which is a bourbon barrel stout blend that I then add vanilla beans to.
Okay.
So this will be batch 2. I released that beer in the first quarter of the first year of private press. So this year it's a little bit different. Primarily it's all rye barrels, trying to kind of like channel my original feelings about Goose Island rye vanilla stout back in like 2012 or 2013.
That beer spoke to you that much, huh?
Oh, it was awesome. I remember I was at Siebel. I'd been going to Siebel for years, but I was there for some like 2 or 3 day course, and it landed, and I got a hold of, I think one of this, I want to say was it Benny's maybe?
Okay.
Benny's. And they,
the big liquor store. Yeah.
Yeah. They put 2 behind the counter, and I was able to bop over there and pick those up. But I mean, that beer was just like, it just blew your mind.
Wait, they put 2 bottles behind the counter for you, or they got 2 bottles that were behind the counter and you knew the secret handshake?
No, I like called in and like reserved them or something. It's kind of hard to remember back. I mean, maybe it was 2011. I can't remember, but it was, it was back then. But so I'm trying to once again to channel that energy. And this year I was able to put it together with all rye barrels, which is pretty exciting. And I've got a blend of Ugandan, Tahitian, and Ecuadorian vanilla beans that will be going into that. So that's one of them. And then the other one is a new beer called Chasm. And it's a blend of bourbon and rum barrel aged stouts. And the rum barrels are kind of unique because they were rum barrels that finished Templeton rye in them for about 6 months. So just those barrels alone had a more subtle rum character than if you were to get like a straight rum barrel. And then I just kind of built off of that with some Weller and Blanton's and Willet rye barrels as well. So, and that one's just like full of like nutty, burnt orange, baking spice, chocolate, vanilla. It's a really dynamic blend. So, things that I'm pretty excited about, but I'm like way ahead. Like I haven't even gotten the first release into my members' hands yet. And I've got the second release in tanks, but this is all part of the plan. So I'm feeling good today.
Okay. Well, I'm glad I got you on a good mood. That's pretty good. You just, I mean, speaking of excited, you just opened up like 9 veins of conversation, and my brain is trying to ping pong right now as to where to go next. But I kind of want to stay with the Goose Island thing for just a second, because so much of, beer experiences, I think, for brewers are formidable beers, things that spoke to them at a certain time in their career that they try to not recreate, but like pay homage to, and I often think of like, what was it from Goose Island? Like Sophie or Matilda was the Orval clone, or the Orval homage that they tried to do. It's one of the sister beers. I can't fully remember which one, but there are there's beers that brewers taste at some point and they say like, damn, I want to make that, but I also want to make it my own.
Yeah.
When you're putting a recipe together before you start, brewing a beer, before it goes into, stainless first and then wood and then back into bright tanks and before it goes into bottles, where do you start in the recipe writing process?
Oh, that's a great question. So I guess we have to travel back in time a little bit. Early on, when I first started brewing at Jackie O's in 2006, like Dogfish Head was a big inspiration to me. And like the big beers from like Avery and the Belgian stuff from Allagash, and a number of other ones. But, those were some beers that were in distribution within the state of Ohio. So that was a big inspiration. And then you had like Shorts came out with their 750 milliliter series, which had a bunch of wacky beers using a lot of different adjuncts.
Yeah.
And that was super inspirational. Obviously Goose Island, with all the Bourbon County stuff. And when they started to expand that series, that was so exciting. And beers like King Henry, which became, Bourbon County barley wine. Those are beers that like me and some of my good brewing friends, we just racked our brains on trying to figure out what was in those and what made them so special. And then you had like the Planet series that Gabe Fletcher put out when he was at Midnight Sun. Just some really like groundbreaking kind of like conceptual type of beer making, right? And so I got really involved with that and used a lot of different ingredients over my tenure at Jackie O's. Played with barrels a lot, played with a lot of mixed culture stuff, sour beers, and it just kind of went on and on. And it became this really huge breadth of beers and beer styles. And then I came to a point where it was time to kind of move on. Primarily, I had fallen in love, and it was time to move from Ohio to California.
More temperate weather as well.
Yes. Yeah. And, and it gave me an interesting opportunity to kind of reset. It gave me an opportunity to start my own brewery, and it gave me a lot of time to reflect upon what I had done and where I then wanted to go. Keeping in mind that I was now in a state that has over 1,000 breweries. I was in a smaller town.
Yeah.
I am in a smaller city within California that has already 16 plus breweries in it. So, how do you enter that market and add something to the brewing culture there without taking anything away? And through a lot of editing and revision, this members only type model, focusing on stouts and barley wines, that does not have a tap room, does not, have anything on draft regularly, does not have anything in stores available for purchase, really started to kind of take hold because I wasn't taking anything away from any of the other brewers, be it tap handles or shelf space or tap room customers. But I was also able to add to the Santa Cruz and Bay Area brewing scene with just a different business model and beers that have always been in demand, but largely under represented here in California.
Yeah.
So from that point, going back to your original question,
yeah,
it's always about, so how can I make something that's really interesting, that's really dynamic, but that also has nuance, that has some grace, that has some different elements to it. That's not just sugar or adjunct or like alcohol or like ABV. And luckily, I find myself at a point, I think, in the brewing world where new and older drinkers alike are ready to go back to that. There is room for that counterpoint to what, pastry stout and pastry wine and the super adjuncted, replicated, candy bar, cereal, whatever, chocolate milk drink, ice cream combo thing is. And I'm just trying to create really dynamic stouts and barley wines and styles alike that aren't hinged upon a bunch of other things. It's just a lot of it's beer and barrel focused. So that's kind of how I always start my quest.
And those two styles in particular, the stouts and the barley wines, those seem to be the ones that impacted you early on as a brewer, as a drinker, but that really sort of speak to you and your creative pursuits these days. I mean, you mentioned when you were at Jackie O's, you're doing sours. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of other, beers that were in the portfolio. It's a pretty large portfolio. But when you're focusing now on this, on private press, focusing largely on two styles, you have to be really into those two styles and really care about those two styles, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, that was that. I became a malt-driven brewer early on. It was primarily the hop shortage of like 2007 or 2008.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, like all I could get was Argentinian Cascade, which was like 3.2 alpha acid, and like that was it. I mean, it was a tiny 300 barrel a year brew pub, and obviously we don't have contracts or anything, so for a year straight it was just ambers, browns, stouts, barley wines, reds. I mean, just stuff that some drinkers today have never even heard of.
Yes, kids, there was once an American red ale.
Yes,
it roamed the land. Yeah,
it did.
By the name of George Killian.
Yeah. So
copper ales. That's right. Yeah, that was like the regional dialect in the Midwest of. We couldn't call it red because the commies were still coming to get us, but copper.
That's right.
We can.
That is right. So, I really became to like. I just love malt. There's so many different flavors and so many combinations, and all of these great maltsters that have, decades, generations, centuries of, history behind them. So I just really gravitated towards that. And the other thing I really gravitated towards was barrel aging. And I just love doing that. I love the process of making something that isn't going to its spot inside of a bottle or keg for another year.
Yeah.
And just the process of seeing it like develop and oxidize and build character, and then finding different, components and barrels and things that they all kind of come together and they can form this unique beverage that that offers the drinker something unique and hopefully exciting. And I still think that there's a lot of exploration and a lot of discovery that can happen just between beer and barrel. And we don't need to always be putting, coffee and hazelnut and marshmallow into things. I think that
I don't know, man. There's a whole bunch of young brewers that are going to show up at your door with clubs in hand.
I know. And I am in a unique position that I am not trying to sell a ton of beer. In my first club year, I sold almost 100 BBLs, almost 100 barrels.
Okay.
So
that's down from what at the old place?
It was like 13 to 14 or something thousand.
Yeah.
So it's very different. And so I am in a unique position. If I had a tap room, if I was trying to compete, if I was trying to move cans, if I was trying to sell stuff on shelves, I would probably pivot to more sugar-rich flavor profiles, more adjuncts, whatnot. But the whole point of doing private press and resetting and restarting and all this was to create a business that I could run instead of it running me. Also, something that is sustainable and that hopefully I can do for the remainder of my working life, because this is what I love doing and this is what I want to do. So, and I've also now been working for myself for over 2 years, and I want to continue working for myself. So, it's all about like finding that balance, and creating this brand or this little world and having my member base and that kind of being it. That seems to be working right now. So hopefully I can continue to kind of mold that and craft it into something that I can do, 15, 20 years plus from now.
It's interesting. And to hear you talk about, doing this for the remainder of your career but it being manageable for you to do, there is such a focus for so many years. And I think it's still there and I'm guilty of asking brewers this question in the past of, well, how, cool that you're doing 13,000 barrels this year. Do you want to get up to 20? Do you want to get up to 25? Like I was asking those questions because it's sort of that American excess or, the bad idea of success of, you have to be bigger in order to be more profitable and then ostensibly to be happier. And I'm sure that when you were doing 13,000 barrels and, you were, well known in beer circles and going out to places and you could go to festivals and, people wanted to show you their t-shirts and take selfies and stuff like that. Going from a large brewery where, and now you're just speaking to, your members that are lucky enough to like snag a spot. That's got to be a little bit of a whipsaw, and it's got to be a little bit of not necessarily a come down, but certainly easier for the blood pressure.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely
like people. I guess the question is like people always talk about getting bigger, but what have you seen as the benefit of going smaller?
Well, so growth is not a goal for me anymore, or currently it is not a goal. Sustainability, as far as like quality of life, is my goal. And I'm not trying to make a bunch of money. I'm just trying to make like really good, engaging beer and live comfortably, but have something that like provides quality of life, for me and for my family. So going from something that was, that had gotten fairly large and it was in a constant state of growth, that was all extremely exciting. That was all like just really fast paced. It was, once you sign with a distributor, then, things really get moving and you're having these, annual recaps and talking about the next year and all this stuff. But, and that works for a lot of breweries. And I'm not saying that that's like a bad model by any means, but it is really fast paced. And it does create some issues sometimes with like the amount of time you're working, the amount of stress, the amount of anxiety, your ability to exercise, take time off, meal plan, or just be like go constantly. Those are all things that I saw in my previous employment, and had a moment to stop, reset, and change a little bit and kind of like refocus that. And so far right now that is working. Who knows, something, could like happen down the road where private press doesn't work anymore. And 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 then there's a different angle. But this has been an incredible move and transfer for me. So I'm just trying to like maintain that.
I mean, you sound relaxed.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely points where like this week and everything, and the last week they've been kind of slow, and that's because pre-sales are coming in for member orders. I've processed all my bottles. I'm waiting on labels to arrive. I can't sell anything until I've got.
Can't do anything until you got the labels. Yeah.
Yep. And, and like shipping companies and logistics and everything are really all up in the air right now. So you got to really just kind of like stop trying to take control of everything and just kind of let some things happen. I've gotten 2 tanks full of beer that I'm going to put out in November or December. So like,
And how big are the tanks?
They're like 10 barrel tanks.
Okay.
Yeah. Pretty small. But inevitably that's going to speed up, and then I'm going to have to ship out 350 boxes, and I'm going to have 350 people come for pickups, and I'm inevitably going to get overwhelmed here soon. So it's different. Instead of it being like a constant like race, if you will, or like this grind, it's like these waves of of like work or of wearing a number of different hats, and so at times it's really kind of relaxed and nice, but at other times it becomes very overwhelming and can produce plenty of anxiety and whatnot. So I guess with this as well, it's also about like mental health and being able to figure out how to balance all this stuff, aside from working a lot or like drinking more, which are things that people in our industry tend to fall back on.
Yeah.
And so now that I'm in this different environment where I don't have to work all the time really hard, or working more doesn't always solve all the problems, and drinking a lot less, you experience things differently. And so I don't know how I got on this track.
No.
I think this is actually pretty important. So it's important that as people within our industry are feeling these pulls of anxiety or anxiousness, that we find healthier tools to help us navigate those rougher waters.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm doing now, because I'm not working 50, 60 plus hours a week and not drinking as much. So I'm experiencing things differently, right? So, like talking to somebody like a professional and finding different tools and healthier ways to navigate these difficult periods that are inevitable within our industry, because it is so fast paced and it is so consumer and market driven, and volatile at times, yet it's pretty, it kind of always bounces back. But, you have to pivot and you have to roll with the punches and all that. And after a while, that really takes its toll. So I think it's important that people find time to like get away from work, to disconnect, to exercise regularly, to, like bring a well thought out meal to work, as opposed to just eating fast food or something from a grab and go. All these things add up into something that is healthier. Like for me, I run a lot now. I've lost about 50 pounds since I moved to California.
Wow, great on you.
Thank you. About 2.5 years ago. And during those runs, I flush it all out, whether it's business stuff, personal stuff, everything. I flush it all out. And previously how I would do that was probably like, you know, a 6-pack of beer or something after work.
Yeah.
And I can do all the same things. I can talk to myself. I can be sad. I can be angry. I can be happy. I can do all that. But I'm doing it through exercise. And, you know, that's my hour every other morning or so. And then I go into work. Now I'm in a position where, you know, I make my own hours and all that. So that might be a little easier for me, but I can't tell you how much more beneficial that is to sustainability, quality of life, and navigating these ups and downs throughout the beer industry, whether it be beer or any other type of job, especially during the pandemic. So, yeah.
I'll have more with Brad in a minute, but first, a word from the folks who help keep the mics hot over here, including NZ Hops, a cooperative of master growers whose legend and cultivars have been crafted for over 150 years to produce some of the world's finest hops. NZ Hops are like no others, unique in their flavors and aromas. Visit nzhops.co.nz to explore more. And Brees is proud to control their malt starting in the field until it arrives at your brewery. They have a long-term relationship with several hundred growers in the Bighorn Basin of Wyoming and Montana, where warm days, cool nights, and floodwater irrigation yield some of the highest quality barley in the U.S. And the best brewmasters are obsessed with creating a high-quality, consistent product. That means reducing mass viscosity for better wort separation and increasing brewhouse efficiency. UltraFlow Max from Novo Enzymes helps you achieve both. Order a free sample today at brewingwithenzymes.com/beeredge. And now back to my conversation with Brad Clark of Private Press Brewing. I want to talk about membership in a moment, but
yes.
Before that, God, you just keep creating all these veins of conversation. But I want to go back to barrels and I want to go back to wood.
Mm-hmm.
And early on, you mentioned, I think Templeton Rye, and you mentioned some others that have sort of, you know, popped up. And you mentioned specific brand names of spirits that had previously been in the barrels.
Yes.
How important is that actually to the beer that you're making?
Yeah, so I've worked with a ton of barrels over the last 14, almost 15 years. Pretty much every one of them has made good beer. If the beer wasn't great, it was probably a packaging issue or a blending issue or a QC issue. You know, no matter what it was, it made great beer. But at the same time, I think it's more interesting to have, well, at least for private press, the whole way I approach things here is I make a batch of beer. Now that might be a 10-barrel batch, or it might be a 20-barrel batch, or a 40-barrel batch, depending on what brewery I'm brewing at. And every one of those beers goes into at least 2 different types of barrels, if not 4 or 6. Now, that could be 6 different types of bourbon. It could be, you know, some bourbon, some rum, and some port, Sauternes, brandy, whatever. But I'm taking a single recipe and then extrapolating it out as far as I can. And if it's like 6 different types of bourbons, what I'm talking about is more like trying to purchase wheated, rye, 4-grain, corn-based, all these different things. So from that one recipe, I can then have these 4 different subsets, which then create 16 different, what I call threads. And each single barrel is what I consider a thread. So then when it comes time to actually blend a beer, I try to know exactly what I'm looking for in my head. So if I say I want this, you know, barrel-aged stout that I'm going to add vanilla to, I've got this flavor profile that I want out of the base stout, which is going to have a little bit of bitterness, maybe some roast, this and that. And I'm going to then go through all of the barrels that might work with that. Like nothing's off the table. It doesn't matter if it's young, if it's old, if it's even barley wine, style, whatever. And then I blend towards it. So I'm pulling from all these different threads and weaving together this rounded expression. And so for me, purchasing a lot of different types of barrels is essential to making the blending experience, one, more engaging for myself, but two, also making a very dynamic beer that hopefully comes across that way on palate. It will definitely look that way on paper.
Yeah.
But hopefully, having all these different components allows me to build complexity and depth easier than being like, this is our imperial stout that we aged in this type of barrel for this amount of time. And that's our annual release of that beer.
Right.
This is what most breweries do. And that works out fantastic for most everybody. But I'm trying to do something a little bit different here. And, this is my interpretation of blending and how these beer styles can kind of come together, making 4 or 5 different stout recipes and 4 or 5 different barley wine recipes. And I've got quads, and I've got this beer style called Munichwine that I'm developing here.
Oh, tell me about that. Tell me about Munichwine.
Munichwine is essentially kind of a subset of barley wine. This comes from running in the woods every morning. This is when my best ideas tend to come to me, when I'm flushing everything out.
Yeah.
And I love Munich malt. I have used Munich malt in a lot of dark beer, almost every dark beer I've ever brewed forever. And so it's just this thing that I'm kind of like really drawn to. This thing that kind of defines me as a brewer, or like my style. So I was like, well, there's wheat wine, there's, oat wine, there's rye wine, but nobody makes Munich wine. So I started developing this new sub-style or subcategory of barley wine. And I brew it. There's a brewery right like next to me, Santa Cruz Mountain. And I brew it there. I just bring a tank over and knock out straight from the brew house into a tank, and then come over, and then I pitch yeast in it and I ferment at my space. But that's been the Munichwine Research Center. And
the epicenter of,
Yes. So it's really interesting. The first one's going to be landing in members' hands here in the next week or so. It's called A Silent Pursuit. It's this thing that I've developed during the pandemic, and there's a number of other brewers that are brewing them now, despite not having tried them yet.
That are also brewing Munich wines now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. As far away as like Norway and Canada and Mexico. And
okay, but you're claiming, like, you're planting the flag that like this was your idea, and they've heard about this now, and now they're doing their interpretations of it.
Yeah, somewhat. And there's been some people that are like, well, there's a lot of brewers that use a lot of Munich malt in their barley wines, or 100% Munich malt for their barley wines, which might be true. It probably is. I don't know if I've never tasted anything like what's coming out of here. It is firmly kind of based around barley wine recipe, but it really presents more Germanic. And
when you say that you don't like what's coming out of here,
I mean press.
Okay.
It doesn't taste like what's coming out. What's coming out of here is like almost like this like Bach English barley wine hybrid. type thing. There's a lot of nuttiness, there's fruitiness, there's baking spice. It's dry, or it's drier than maybe what a lot of people are drinking right now. So I'm excited to get this first one out so that there can be some sort of definition around what it looks like, what it smells like, what it tastes like, what it feels like.
Okay.
But at the same time, then it becomes the Wild West, and
Well, yeah, and that's what I want to talk to you about. Like, I was going to make a joke about Alex Kidd and his merry band of boofers and all that, but like, you kind of hit on something that's much more important, which is you got me thinking about Kim Sturdivant when he, is credited with creating Brut IPA and putting it out into the world, and it didn't even make it past infancy in the larger world because nobody knew what the fuck it was. Mm-hmm. And everybody had their own interpretations, and a style that grabbed everybody's attention for a hot minute. I mean, like, I wrote about it in magazines and things like that, but like,
yeah. There was a lot.
I had Pete Schlossberg stop me at CBC. Pete of Pete's Wicked stopped me at CBC.
Oh, yeah.
Like, have you tried? Brut IPA from Kim Sturdivant? Like, when it's rising to Pete's level, it's like, all right, we got to pay attention to this.
But I mean, like, it was in Pete's neighborhood, though.
I understand, but he was jazzed about it. He wasn't coming up to me and being like, "Hey, when was the last time you had a copper ale?"
Yeah. Fair enough.
But is there a worry that something that, after knowing what happened with Brut IPA and how quickly it just got bastardized and the marketplace couldn't figure out what the fuck it was, and so therefore, like, it just died. Is there a worry about releasing a style that you feel passionate about to the world?
Of course.
And but how do you are you thinking about how to focus that in? So, like, there's generally accepted styles for New England style IPA or, British barley wine or like anything else like that, which had a little bit of time to grow. Are you thinking about like how to at least put bumpers up in this bowling alley that you're, I don't know, I'm making bad metaphors now.
Yeah, no. I understand what you're saying. Maybe. To me, so I don't like policing things. I like to just my job is to make beer and sell beer, to put it like very simply, right? And so if I'm making this arguably new style or subcategory of barley wine, which is Munichwine, I'm not gonna tell people what they can and cannot do. I've already seen how it's been interpreted in funny ways, just because of this game of telephone and also being somewhat silent or secretive about it.
Yeah.
So, the overall style of Munichwine could live. It could die very soon. I find it personally very singular and different, and I really enjoy drinking it. So I am investing into making it for the next club cycle, which would be year 3. We'll see if it survives past that. But right now, the excitement around the innovation of it and people being able to try something different is all really exciting. So why not just kind of go with it? Why not kind of help guide some of these people that are reaching out to me? Maybe not guide some of them, depending on how much they're trying to mine out of me. I always tell people, I've done my work. It is now time for you to do yours. So they're so focused on replicating it that they forget that they also, because they are a brewer, they have license to put their own spin on it. And that's extremely important, because if people don't take that liberty or aren't willing to, then you're just creating more and more of the same. And I think it's important to like invest in your time, in your process, in your development, and finding a way to kind of like create your own style.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of practice. That's why you don't see a lot of barley wine out there. I mean, there are a lot of people making barley wine, but if you only make it once or twice a year, you can't tweak your recipe enough to get it to another level, or to get it to, you know, your level. And if you don't, you know, really tinker with things, if you don't taste barrels, if you don't blend often, if you don't practice, you'll never get to the point of being really good at it. You know,
Yeah.
you've got to just constantly engage. You've got to focus. You've got to, you know, clear your head. But at the same time, you also have to be like aware and present, because things are happening all the time around you. And you never know when inspiration may strike, like when you're running in the morning and Munichwine pops in. And I've got a couple other things that have popped into my head that I haven't done yet. And I'm not going to talk about those.
Okay. All right. I won't, I won't press you, because like we've gone pretty deep into Munichwine right now.
But you know,
yeah,
I'm really excited to see where it goes, because inevitably somebody's going to make it darker. Somebody's going to put marshmallow in it.
right.
Somebody's going to
double dry hop it.
Yeah. I mean, I've double barreled it. I've used, you know, I've got a honey Munichwine going. You know, I got a lot of ideas from Munichwine that I need to flush out.
Yeah.
And other people are also going to be flushing those out sooner than later. And maybe it's just a flash in the pan. You know,
yeah, I mean, Kim was on the show and told me like he doesn't even make one anymore. He's at Pacifica now, and like,
I know, yeah,
at least at the time, there wasn't even on a
right up the road from me. But I mean, for me, if Munichwine got as big of a splash as Brut IPA did, I mean, wow, that would be like such a rush. I mean, I think like, you know, like Sam Adams made one. You know, I mean, it was like a new beer stardom thing, you know? But that's not my intention either. My intention was I just wanted to make a super Munich heavy barley wine, because those are two things that I love, and it made sense to me. So let's see what people think. The flip side of it is people might not like it.
Well, that's the other thing. I mean, it's consumer demand. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, my Untapped ratings might drop because of Munichwine, but
will that bother you?
No, it won't. But that's a reality that a lot consumers look at. You know, Munichwine might be my lowest rated Untapped beer, but does that mean it's the worst beer I make? I don't know. I don't really care.
Well, again, you're making 100 barrels a year, though, and I mean, and you'll know in a week or so when your members get a chance to try this. And so let's talk about that, of the membership model, and how there is, you know, a set number of people who have access to your beer. It's not like going to Kroger and, you know, a supermarket and, you know, buying 6-packs, or, you know, showing up at a tap room for like a big release day and multiple things. It's, you know, if you're lucky enough to get in, you're in. And I think by and large, the people who are buying brewery memberships and trying to get into it are, you know, genuinely excited about being beer fans, and what they have the access to. So one, you know, why was the membership model appealing to you? And two, now that it's in practice, how has it been going?
Yeah, so the compelling part of it was that I could possibly make stouts and barley wines only. And that made a lot of sense to me. One, because I love making them. They're my favorite styles to make. And two, because Santa Cruz and California and the Bay Area does not need another IPA, does not need another lager. There is so much good beer happening right now that it's just it is saturated. So if I can just make these styles, I can't have a tasting room because that gets really complicated when you're serving stuff that's 12 to 15% ABV, and that's all you have. So that's where the membership thing really found its hold. And luckily I had enough of a following that to be able to sell 600 memberships in the first year worked out great. Turns out 600 wasn't quite enough to really make it financially work. So this year it's 700 members. Hopefully that's enough. And I think it will be. And I say hopefully because if I need to do more, then it changes my entire, like I have to get bigger tanks, and I have to get a bigger glycol unit, and I have to get more space, and I have to hire a full-time employee. Because right now it's just me, and I do have a part-time employee, but he's kind of like as needed. And he's an incredible employee, but he also works at a winery, and they're in crush right now. So I haven't had him in over 3 weeks, but it works out great because I haven't really needed him in the last 3 weeks. But so, exclusivity is valuable right now. And I know that. And I remember listening to like Tommy Arthur talk about, these like 100 bottle release things. And this was years and years ago. Like fabricating exclusivity or like beefing up markets and all that. And at that time, that's when like Jackie O's, I think, was coming from like brew pub into production, which was around 2013, 14.
Sure.
And I was just like, we're just going to make the same great beer, but we're going to get it out there to everybody. If anybody wants it, they can get it. It's not that hard. And that felt great at the time. But that also created a lot of work that turned into having a barrel cellar that was 800, 900 to 1,000 barrels at any given moment. And it's just a lot of work. So this all comes back to that thing that I said early on about I wanted to have a business that I could run instead of it running me.
Yeah.
And that is paramount to what this business is. So I hope that my current number of 700 members proves to be, substantial and works. And I believe that it will. But I'm only in year 2, so I'm still like, figuring things out and tweaking things for sure and making mistakes and learning a lot. So, but on when it's good, it's good, and when it's overwhelming or you have setbacks, it's really hard to deal with because it's such a small amount of beer and everything. I work 14, 18 months ahead in my head. So if a batch goes bad and I don't realize that in time, which hasn't happened yet, knock on wood, that could really set me back. If I have a bad bottling run, that could really set me back. So there's a lot of risk involved with this business model. But I hope that the things that I've experienced over my 15 plus years, the ups and the downs, are kind of mitigating some of those setbacks.
So of the 700 members that you have, if you're in, do you get to renew year after year, or do you bring in new members every year?
No, I mean, like for instance, in year 1, there's a 92% renewal rate. So there's like 30 or 40 members that didn't renew, which is fine. So I added, 30 or 40 more, and then I added another 100 off of the wait list.
Yeah.
So currently the wait list is capped because it got quite large. But once year 2 is over, I'm sure some people will say, like, I don't know, I didn't really like the stouts, and he put out a lot of barley wines, and I don't really like barley wines, so this isn't for me, or whatever.
Munichwine.
Or he put out too many Munichwine. The beers didn't, catch enough money on the gray market.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that as well. Do you have any idea of your 700 members, how many are just flipping these things?
Oh, there's definitely a few of them because, people send me stuff. But like I said, I don't have the stomach to police this shit.
Okay.
I do not want to be hunting people down and revoking their membership rights. And, it's just part of the game. And I'm not encouraging it. Please do not do that. Yeah. I'm working really hard by myself to try to make all this happen. So just respect that if you can. Trade it. You can trade all you want. Like I said, my job is to make beer and to sell beer, and I price it accordingly. And that's that,
Right. As we start to wrap up here, I want to go back to 2 words that you mentioned early on with talking about nuance and grace. And I always love these sort of intangibles that brewers talk about, like when they know something is ready from a barrel to be transferred to bright tanks, or, when the liquid speaks to them in a certain way where they know it's their representation that they want people, to open the bottle and to, drink it and not trade it and all of that. But nuance and grace, what does that translate for you into the final product? Like, how can members or people who get a hold of one of your bottles, how can they experience that? Or is that just personal for you?
Well, it's very personal for me. I mean, this entire brewing project company is, I think, one of the more personal, intimate beer expressions that are out there. And there's other ones like me, of course. I'm not saying that I'm the only one doing this like membership only thing. But for me, from the copy, from the design, obviously from the blending and the beers and the names and then literally, the packaging, the labeling, the pasteurization, it goes on and on. It's all done by me. So I take it all very seriously. And, I make sure that I know what I want, and then I blend towards it. And when I'm blending towards it, that can turn into, 6 to 15 different blends. And it's all about finding the one that like hits all the notes that I'm looking for, has a certain feel or life or zeal to it that I find comforting. And the way that I try to express that to my members is through these inserts that come with each release, that gives you a more detailed description of the beer and the genesis behind it. It gives you every barrel that was in it, the barrel number, the beer that was in it, and the barrel and the amount of time that was in the barrel. And then it also gives you, like ABV, the carbonation, the serving, what I suggest the serving temperature should be, which is pretty much room temp.
Okay.
And then there's another insert that then tells you about each beer that was in all the blends. And they're all named after jazz musicians. So it tells you a little bit about the jazz musician, just a sentence or two. And then it tells you a little bit about the beer, but it also gives you like the starting gravity, the finishing gravity, and the ABV before going in the barrel. So if you're able to sit there and enjoy a pour of one of my bottles over the course of, 30 or 45 minutes, or maybe enjoy a bottle over the course of a couple hours, you can sit there and read about all this stuff. You can read about the beers. Might be able to, if you wanted to, you could listen to some of the music of some of the people that inspire these things. And that is my way of creating the private press experience. As much as I would love to design and build and experience a private press tap room, it inevitably goes counterintuitive to what the business is, because it creates more hours, more jobs, and more beer. So my whole thing is about being as transparent as possible with my members and giving them materials so that they can, quote unquote, kind of play at home. This also includes sharing lab results, primarily around ABV and extract and caloric data on every beer. And there's just like there's
which is almost like the cardinal sin of the styles that you're making. Like I didn't want to know what the caloric intake was, but I appreciated it when I saw them. Yeah.
Well, it's about 40 calories per ounce. And
so if you're sharing, that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And my beers aren't that thick, if you will. My beers aren't that sweet. My beers are typically called medium to thin. So, if you're drinking the pastry stouts, I would not be surprised if that's more like 60 to 75 calories per ounce. Because it is kind of jarring at times, but I also think it's just important that, people know what they're ingesting. If I'm using honey, if I'm using nuts, if I'm using lactose, that goes on the barrel, that goes on the bottle, despite how little.
Nuts are important. I mean, you don't want to
nuts
kill
are very
somebody,
important, but honey and lactose is also very important for our vegan friends. And there are also, allergies associated with both those ingredients. And whether it's a tiny, tiny bit or a lot, it's going on the label. And people can, read that however they want. Sometimes I've put out stuff that has just a touch of honey in it, and it says brewed with honey. And people are like, so much honey. And there's hardly any honey in it. Or, there was like one bag of lactose in a 20 barrel batch, and everybody thinks or not everybody. A lot of people think I overdid lactose, and there was hardly any of it in there. What I overdid was, malt extract. So, it's a funny thing, but I think being transparent and like trying to make them feel like they are part of the process and that they can really pick apart the beer if they'd like to. That's what makes this more interactive, more intimate, more personal, and that's what makes it successful as well.
I've been asking some folks on the show for the last couple of weeks I've been saying, like, during the pandemic, my wife and I were watching The Good Place again. And, just for sort of an escape from the crushing realities of the world. And, there's this whole concept towards the end of the show of being able to go through a green door and being any place, anytime with whoever you want. If such a thing existed in today's world, where, travel is still not quite opened up and, we're missing some things, if you could end this interview, which I'm sure you want to at this point, but, if you could end this interview and walk through a door and be in any pub anywhere, having a beer with somebody, where would you like to be? Who would you like it to be with?
I would just like go down the road from my house and go to the Sante Darius taproom in Santa Cruz, and I would have one of their lagers next to my partner Adair, co-owner of Sante Darius, and I'd eat some of the great food there. I mean, it has become and has been my happy place ever since I moved here. Now, there's a bunch of other great places that I've visited, but one thing about the pandemic and not traveling much and, just kind of being locked in this routine is I've come to appreciate being home. I've come to appreciate being with Adair, with our dog Poppy. I've come to appreciate just being here, where I am, and it's pretty great. And I feel fortunate to be able to say that, and so of course, getting away is fun, but
it's nice to be home.
And what you have is also a really incredible thing. And for me to be here, to be with someone I care deeply about, and to be doing this new venture and to have it resonate with the members and with people outside of the membership, this is dream come true. So I do not take that for granted, and I'm working very diligently to make this something that I can do, like I said, for the rest of my career. So fingers crossed that works.
All right. Last question, I promise, because I want to bring it back to the beginning. And that was very sweet, by the way. That was very, very, very nice. Everybody's like, oh, I'm getting on a plane and getting the fuck out. You're like, I'm just going to go down the street and hang out with my love. And I love that. It's amazing and wonderful. And now I'm going to crash this into the side of the mountain by saying we started off by talking about a Goose Island beer that inspired you, and that you were working on a beer today that sort of is an homage to that, or loosely based, et cetera, et cetera. If you inspired somebody back in 07, 08 during the hop shortage with your Argentinian Cascade,
oh my God,
what is your advice to that pro brewer that is out there right now, working with Argentinian Cascade about making the best darn copper ale that they can?
Just focus on the malt. There is so much to work with. There hasn't been a malt shortage that I can remember. So just give it, I mean, I don't even care. I mean, I don't say that I don't care, but like the hops that I use, like I don't spot buy, I don't contract, I don't even have hops.
Yeah.
When I go and brew somewhere else, I'm like, what can I use? Because I want some sort of like bitterness, but honestly, a hop aroma or flavor is really not that important to me. Not to say that it doesn't play into the beer's character, but these things are sitting in an oak for over a year. They're oxidizing, they're changing, they're doing this thing, and focus on the malt. You can still make really expensive beer using no hops. Just use a lot of European malt, because those guys know what they're doing.
I mean, if I had the sound effects, that'd be the record scratch right there. That'd be the needle across of, yeah.
It's true.
Hey, thanks for doing this. Thanks for, I know you don't do a lot of these, so the fact that you did this one, I really appreciate. And boy, this is exciting. This was a lot of fun.
Good. Well, I'm really pleased that you enjoyed the beers that I sent, and I have never done that before either, so I just thought it would be a good platform to see what people thought. So cool. I'm glad that they resonated with you, and I was humbled that you reached out to me to do this interview, and it's been great to share my thoughts on what I'm doing in the beer industry, and most importantly, like taking care
Argentinian
of
hops. Yeah.
And Argentinian hops, and running and exercise and time away from work.
Yeah. Well, I know you're still at the brewery, so I'll let you get back to it. thanks again.
Yeah. Cheers, John.
You can follow the brewery on its Instagram page, and there you can learn more about if and when any additional membership slots will become available. And if you are a member, I hope you'll open up some of those bottles with friends to share the love. And if you're a brewer making a Munichwine, look to the creator and see what's up. And then be sure to let us know how yours came out. Who knows, maybe this will become a sub-style at competitions, well, just as soon as barleywine and some of the others are unlumped. Anyway, what about you? What do you like about membership clubs? Who's doing small batch beer that you're jazzed about? Let me know. John Hall at beeredge.com. That's JOHNHOLL at beeredge.com. Or you can join the conversation on Twitter at John_Hall. And of course, Beer Edge is on social media at The Beer Edge. And if you love smoked beers, and of course you do, a reminder to check out the This Week in Rauch Beer group on Facebook, or you can join the Smoky Beers conversation on Twitter and Instagram at TW Rauch Beer. If you're interested in advertising, please reach out to Liz Melby. She's at liz@beeredge.com, and she'll let you know all of the information. And speaking of that, this episode was made possible by the support of Briess, which has been malting barley for 145 years. And the fifth generation of family ownership is currently leading the company. But the values have always remained the same, producing the highest quality, most consistent malt, and working directly with their customers to help them succeed. From pilsners to porters and everything in between, Briess offers the finest handcrafted malts, extracts, and adjuncts to help you brew the perfect beer. We're also brought to you by NZ Hops. In a little country far down in the Pacific, you'll find a cooperative of master growers whose legend and cultivars have been crafted for over 150 years with creativity and passion to produce some of the world's finest hops. Years of partnerships with dedicated hop breeding programs and farming knowledge handed down through generations sees the current day master growers proudly providing 18 unique New Zealand hop varieties to the world. Visit nzhops.co.nz or find them on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn at NZHops Ltd to learn more. And the best brewmasters are obsessed with creating high-quality, consistent products. And that means reducing mash viscosity for better wort separation and increasing brewhouse efficiency. Ultraflow Max from Novo Enzymes helps you achieve both. It's time to brew with enzymes. Increase your brewhouse efficiency and achieve faster filtration today with Ultraflow Max. Order a free sample today at brewingwithenzymes.com/beeredge. And one last reminder to go to beeredge.com to see all that we have going on, and also to check out the Beer Edge podcast hosted by Andy Crouch. Steal This Beer? Yeah, it has new episodes every Monday, and the BYO Nano podcast comes out on the 15th of every month. Please check those out. And as for this show, well, Nate Schweber, he does the music, and Jeff Quinn designed our logo. I'm John Hall. New episodes of this show release every Wednesday, and that's when I'm going to be back again to drink beer and to think beer.